Today's video is sort of a retrospection of the last 12 months. We're coming close to the end of the year, and I recently realized that it's pretty exactly 1 year since I started to dabble around in film photography. On the channel, it started on the 27th of December 2020. I'll be taking you with me with the GoPro, just like with the digital photography videos, just that in this case I have pretty much no idea what I'm doing. Let's do it. After watching a bunch of tutorials and still needing multiple attempts to load my film, I shot my first roll in November last year. I remember being super excited, and I mean the abnormally wiggly kind of excited, to get the results of that first roll, because I had no clue whether I was doing this right, if it worked, if analog photos were even real, and then I got it. The photos fascinated me, not because they were good, but because this analog process actually worked. You see, as a digital native, I'm so used to everything being digital, so that analog technologies fascinate me to an extent that digital immigrants probably think it's funny. Anyway, with this first successful roll of film shot, I began my analog photography journey, if you will, parallel to my digital photography. And so in this video, I would like to look back at the beginnings and how my film photography has evolved, and also share some favorites that I haven't shown on the channel yet. So, in the past 12 months, I did actually manage to shoot quite a lot of film, and so it was quite hard to select a few to show in this video because I do want to represent the whole year. And I was quite selective, but still the list became quite long, so let's dive straight into this. These two photos are still from that first morning of shooting film. I chose these two because these are just two photos I really like from that roll. The first one is just this lamp in the midst of all these trees. I also like how the trees indicate the month November, at least here in Austria, because you can see that there's some colourful leaves from autumn, but you can also see that there are not many leaves left, and that is exactly what November is like in Austria. And I don't know, I think I quite like this sort of timestamp in this photo. And the right photo I might just like because of an emotional bias, as it so often is with my photos. I'm not sure, but the thing is that this field here is really close to my parents' place, so this is basically where I grew up. Therefore, of course, there is some sort of an emotional attachment to it, but apart from that, the photo is pretty decent, I'd say. And also, as said, I was just so fascinated that this analog photography process actually worked. And so yeah, this is the beginning of my analog photography. Then I'd like to still stay in November 2020. The left photo is the oh so classic I'm shooting film mirror selfie. I think we've all seen this before from our fellow film photographers. It's something we really like to do. And the right photo is again at my parents' place. I mean, at this time I was still living at my parents', and that window that you can see, that's actually the window of my room. And the light was just really nice on that day. It was winter light, and so I went out onto the balcony and got this photo, which I, to this day, still really like. I just love the lighting here. The next two photos are also still from November 2020, and so in this phase, this first month, I was just accumulating experiences, just shooting and just trying to find out how this film camera works, how the whole process works, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just shooting, and these results are actually really good. I think these two photos I scanned 3 times or so until they finally looked alright. Yeah, the scanning process was quite difficult for me to get a hang of, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, let's move on to these two photos, which you might remember from a video where I presented these. So these two photos are from a little photo excursion I did with the two guys over here, two friends of mine who also like to shoot film, and so we gathered up with our film cameras and just went on a little drive somewhere to the countryside and walked around. The left photo is just a simple flash portrait I got of them. As you might know, I really like this amateurish, authentic look of a flash, like frontal flash straight into their faces. So I really like this photo. And the right photo I just got because I found it quite funny where we were parking, and it's just a nice documentation of the day that we were having. And also this is still part of that phase that I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just shooting and trying to collect some experience and get to know how film and light just work together. Then let's jump forward to January 2021. These two photos are actually lab scans. I always got my negatives back and tried to scan it myself, but this whole roll basically, I just couldn't get my scans to look even close to the lab scans. The left photo especially, I have no idea how they scanned this. Maybe I just need to try it again now, because I've learned so much more about scanning, but back then I gave up on scanning this roll myself and just decided to use the lab scans, even though some things they do are not quite my preferences. But in this case, their scans just looked so much better than mine, and so here are 2 lab scans, and so this still represents this very much beginning phase in which I didn't get a hang of the scanning yet. I was getting sort of comfortable with shooting by now, so handling the camera, inserting the film, etc., that kind of stuff got gradually easier, I would say. I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but loading film was really hard for me at the start because I didn't know how sensitive these film cameras are, and if I stick the film into some wrong slot or something that it could break the camera. I mean, considering the camera is 40 years old, I was trying to be very careful. So the first time I loaded the Pentax K1000, I think I needed 4 attempts, and by this time I was getting a hang of it. So overall, I'd say in this phase I was getting comfortable with the shooting process. Then, this is just a few weeks later, still in January 2021, and this I'd personally say is sort of a important or a meaningful roll, because this was the first roll of film that I shot which I actually thought produced some good photos. So all the photos before, there were a couple photos I liked, but none of them were not really photos that I would show to someone and tell them I shoot film, look at this. Those were all photos that I just shared here on the channel, but of course I made it clear to everyone I'm just starting out, I don't really know what I'm doing. And the photos somewhat reflected that. And this is the first time that I got my negatives back and scanned them, converted the negatives to positives, and thought, these actually don't look too bad. I actually like these a lot. And that was a really good feeling. It felt like I'd finally accomplished this stage where I felt like I'm getting a hang of it. So in that sense, I'd say these 2 photos, or the whole roll on which these 2 photos were, is sort of a meaningful roll. Then we're doing quite a jump in time now to April 2021. In between January and April, I didn't really shoot anything because I was a little overly busy in that time, because in April I shot my first bigger short film, which should come out early 2022, maybe? I don't know. I'm hoping that I'll get it done by then. But it was quite a big shoot, especially for me. It was the biggest project that I've ever done. It still is. Therefore, the weeks before the actual shoot in April were intense preparation times, and at the same time I was running this channel, and so I didn't really have time to go out and shoot film and explore the medium of analog photography. But then after the shoot in April, I was so looking forward to getting back to it, and then these are actually shots I did for a course in university. Maybe you remember the video I did about these. I was looking through the photos from this roll now while selecting the photos that I want to show in this video, and thought, I really like these. I still really like these. I think they turned out beautifully. Unusually, I shot black and white, and also unusually, I shot some portraits, which I rarely do. But maybe that is one reason why I like them so much, because they're so different to what I usually do. And on the other hand, the scanning here also went quite alright. It was definitely easier because it was black and white, so I didn't have any colors that I had to mess around with to make them look alright, or good even, because that's the main problem. Usually the colors just look off and somehow strange when I scan myself, and then I need to correct that, but that's not the case with black and white, and so I was really happy with these scans. Then, here are 3 more photos from April 2021, also shot on that roll of Kodak T-Max. I just wanted to include these in this collection because I do really like these 3 shots particularly. And then let's move on to May 2021. These photos from this roll of Kodak Color Plus I shot in May were another marker or achievement for me in my process of learning analog photography. I don't know if you can relate. Do you know that moment when you shoot a roll of film and then see the results and think, this might be the best photos, the best film photos that I have ever shot? And that was the case when I got this roll back. I really like the results that I got from this shoot. And these are both self-scanned, and I thought the scanning worked so well with these. I was really happy with the colors that I could get out of the negatives, because that was one main struggle that I had, and also that the photos often just look dirty in a way. But these 2 photos are 2 that I remember vividly as my favorites. I mean, I still absolutely love these, especially the left one of the caravan. I don't exactly know what it is, but so many things align in this photo, and just the colors here are amazing. So I still think these are really good photos, and back in May when I produced these, I considered this roll to maybe be the best roll that I had shot so far. So I was sort of getting a hang of this thing. Then here are 2 more photos from that same roll, also just 2 from that photo shoot in May that I really liked. Then we're still staying in May, but these are now photos from a different roll of film. These 2 photos are from a roll of Kodak Gold that I shot sometime in May, and I made a video about these actually because there were a lot of photos that I really liked. And so at this point, this phase, I was really quite comfortable with shooting film by now, and scanning was also going quite alright. I still had a few things that I really didn't like with my scanning. Just something that was still bothering me is my success rate, meaning the amount of photos I had to shoot to get photos that I was actually satisfied with. That rate was still really low, so I'd shoot maybe 10 photos and 1 would be alright, and the others would be or completely throwaways, I don't know. And so from here on, I sort of had the hang of the process itself, but I knew there was still so much to learn because my success rate was so low. Here are 2 more photos from May, maybe even from the same roll, I'm not entirely sure anymore. The left photo was on the way to shopping. This was sort of the beginning, I guess, of just casually shooting film throughout the mundane activities such as going grocery shopping, etc. So that is what we were doing here. And on the right side, this is a portrait of a friend of mine, and I really liked the light that was coming into her room that day, and I got this portrait, which I still really like. I'm quite fond of this portrait. Then, in June 2021, maybe you remember the video I made about this, I went out to try a new camera with a roll of Kodak Ultramax. And as I got the roll back, I got surprised by more than half of the photos being pretty terrible, technically speaking, because the camera sadly was broken in a certain way. The shutter was lagging and the shutter speeds were all over the place. So on this roll, I had a couple photos that were just totally bad. And now retrospectively, I think this was like the discouragement after a phase of euphoria. So as I told you, the last couple of months I really felt like I was getting a hang of this. And so this here feels like after a while of euphoria because everything's working out, you have to somehow hit a wall just to like slow down a bit. And so this was a moment of discouragement where I thought, what is going on? Okay, maybe I'm absolutely bad at this. And I partly blame it on the gear, maybe fully. I don't know. Here are 2 photos anyway from that roll that actually did work out nicely. So that right one is flawless, I think, and the left one is actually slightly underexposed, but in post I could sort of fix the broken parts of the photo and it looks quite alright now. Then these 2 photos from July 2021 definitely do not feel like they are from back in July. They feel like they're from a couple weeks ago. And this was another roll where I thought I nailed it. I really like these photos. These are the 2 favorites from that roll. And it was this time when I found a new thing with scanning. I don't want to get too much into detail with scanning because that would take too long, but basically I refined my method of scanning, and so my photos got much better due to that. So it wasn't actually the shooting, but it was actually the scanning over the negatives that I had shot that was really needing some improvement. And this was, I think, the first roll where I used that refinement that I had. And I was getting results that I was so happy with, so this is that first roll. And then here are 2 photos from July 2021 from my trip to Italy this summer, which you probably remember because I made like 6 videos or so about that trip. And this trip overall, photographically speaking, was a great success. I got a lot of photos that I'm really happy with, but I'm still in this phase of not being satisfied with my success rate because there were a lot of photos that either needed a lot of work in post, because I'm not sure if Negative Lab Pro just is sometimes really confused with the interpretation of the negatives, or if it's something that I did wrong in the shooting process. I don't know exactly, but I'm still trying to figure that out, and this success rate that I was speaking of was still quite low for what I'm trying to get to, let's say it like that. And so then let me just go through some of these photos just to recap this trip. Some of my favorite shots from Italy. So we've got that left shot of the table with the 4 chairs and that red bucket, which I always like to point out when looking at this photo because I think it just adds so much to this photo. And the right photo, I mean, it's an empty road. You know that I like empty roads. I mean, it's not really empty, but it's almost empty, so I'll count it. Then here are more photos from Italy. I just selected a few that I personally like a lot from that trip. And so here are another two. This time I wanted to show you a few of the night shots that I got. I didn't do so much night photography, but the night photography I did do actually came out quite nicely, I personally think at least. Then we're moving on to August 2021. So Melly and I did that Austria road trip and I documented that with a roll of film and got some shots which again I thought, I think I'm really getting a hang of it, but what is going on with these few photos that just don't work out? I still just have these photos that I often miss. Maybe I'll stay like that forever, I don't know. But I'm really trying to maybe hopefully one day get that one roll where I think every single photo here worked. Because it's not like some photos from each roll are not good in my personal opinion, but I actually think they're bad, like they actually just didn't work. But on that roll from that road trip, I also got these two photos. So this was after the road trip already. I was trying to finish up the roll and got these two photos, which I actually did quite casually, but really liked the results. I think these two came out beautifully. And then here are two more photos from August. This is, again, from the more casual side of film photography that I was doing. It's casual, it's raw, and I personally think it's funny. But again, might just be an emotional bias from me, I don't know. And the right photo, I think I've never shown on this channel, but it was actually just on the same roll. I was trying to finish up like the last 3 photos or so that I had left after the film shoot. And on this particular day, we had beautiful clouds. I think this looks really cool. Then, only 2 months ago, in September 2021, I was able to try out a roll of Lomography 800. Maybe you remember that I made a video about that. Before I made that video, I actually went out to shoot a sunrise once, and here are 2 photos from that sunrise shoot. Then here are 2 photos from that video I was speaking of where I went out to shoot in the night with that roll of Lomography 800. And these are just 2 photos that I really like from that series that I got that night. Next, let's move on to the last 2 photos from September. These 2 were actually shot on that roll of Fujifilm Superior Extra 400, which I showed you in the last video. This was shortly after finishing that video, so I didn't film this and just got these 2 photos, which I thought now is a good opportunity to show you these, because I think these turned out beautifully. Then we're moving on to October, and so that of course means we're coming to the end of the video. I've got 2 more slides, and these 4 photos are again this moment where I feel like this is the best roll of film I've ever shot. So these 2 photos and the 2 following were also on that roll of Fuji Superior Extra 400, and I still had maybe half of the roll or maybe a third of the last third of the roll left. On this particular morning, I was out while it was still dark to shoot the process from dark to sunrise, but I was doing a digital photography session. And then as the sun had come up, I sort of ended my digital session, and then on my way back home, I actually got out the Pentax and decided to try to finish my roll of Fuji Superior. And that's when I got these photos, and these, I just think they are beautiful. I'm so in love with these photos at the moment. And the left photo just showing this calm, peaceful, still a little misty field with this one tree, and a little detail that I quite like is the farm at the back. And the right photo, I don't really know what it is. It's this combination of that building and the signs that are quite in focus here. And also for both of these, the lighting. The lighting was amazing. The sun had actually come up already, but the light was quite diffused because of all the mist that was still here. And therefore I was able to get this beautiful, warm, soft sunlight, and I think it really works with these photos. Now then, let me end this video with 2 photos which also mark a first time for me with film photography. As you know, with digital photography, I quite enjoy to go out in misty nights, and I hadn't done that with film yet. I didn't know how it would work, if it's the same with digital, or I was just quite used to shooting on sunny days and maybe a few cloudy and rainy days, but overall scenes in daylight. I had done a couple night shoots, but I also didn't know how mist would work, and the thing with mist is, misty nights are just so special to me that I really don't want to mess it up. And on this particular night, I was out with both my digital and my film camera, and so I was able to get sort of digital backups in case I would mess up the analog photos. But as you can see, these worked out beautifully. At least I personally am super satisfied with these. Left and right photo are both amazing. I don't know, what do you think? Because this, for me, these 4 photos that I just showed you, and especially these 2 are my absolute favorite film photos that I've ever taken. I don't know if I'm being like overly euphoric now just because this is a misty photo and it finally did that with film, but I think these turned out beautifully. I really like it. And so yeah, that's it. That's a little recap of this past year, or actually the past 12 months since November 2020. That is how film photography has found its way onto this channel, which now I personally find it unthinkable to have this channel without film photography. So I'm really happy I took the leap in November last year and finally tried it out. And now a year later, I'm getting results that I'm really happy with. It took about a year to get a hang of this. Anyway, I should probably end this video. I don't know how long I've been speaking already, but probably the video is a bit long. So that's it for this week. I hope this video was in some way interesting or maybe even inspiring for you, especially if you're starting out with film photography and don't know how much you want to pursue it. I suppose this could work as motivation that in about a year you will be far more satisfied with your photos than you are right now, in case you just started out. I don't know who this video exactly is for, but I hope you, even if film photographer or not, enjoyed this video and just me rambling about my photos here, as I sometimes like to do. I hope you found this video in any way interesting or entertaining. And with that said, that's it for this week. I hope you had a good time. Leave a like if you did, consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and I'll see you again next week in the next video. Until then, goodbye.